A very good evening to you. My name is Yvonne Okwara. Our rolling coverage of the last journey, the final journey of former Prime Minister Raila Odinga continues here today on the 16th day of October, a day after his death was announced. We'll continue to give you tributes and recollections and reflections from various persons, and we'll also be taking you live to Bondo to take a look at the arrangements that are being made there and that continue today through the night. Let's start with what took place earlier today. Shall we go to Sam Gituku first? He's live in Bondo to tell us about the preparations. Sam, good evening. Last we spoke to you here on Citizen Television, you told us about the grave site that's been identified and the preparations of that have already began. What more can you tell us at this hour? Sam, if you can hear me, bring us up to speed with the latest in terms of the preparations in Bondo.
Right, Yvonne. It's been quite a day here in Bondo with two major locations of so much activity. But let me start with Kang'o Ka Jaramogi, which is the final resting place of Raila Odinga, which we were able to learn about it sometimes this evening. We were there. We witnessed the marking of that area with now the recognition that that is where the gravesite will be. And of course, also the pictures of the action going on, the activity of having to dig that particular place so that it can be prepared as the final resting place for Raila Odinga. Of course, very many people had come to witness that as the digging was going on. There were some young people that had come with their candles, displaying them on the same location, many of them marking this vigil, the very important night, the 16th of October, when Raila Odinga returned to the country. And on the same day, there's action going on to prepare the burial site that will now continue to be prepared. Of course, you have so many pictures of what was going on. At the same time, we understand that in the next hours, including tomorrow, we will be seeing the preparation of that site, a bit of construction going on so that they can lay to rest Raila Odinga come on Sunday. But of course, you will understand, Yvonne, that this is just the start of so much activity that we'll be seeing in the coming days. Obviously, knowing that after the funeral service, the state funeral that will be in Nairobi tomorrow, we'll also be seeing the body moving to Kisumu, to the Nyanza region, come Saturday, where the public viewing is expected at the Jomo Kenyatta Stadium in Mamboleo. And then thereafter, the body will be moved towards Bondo, particularly to this location that I am in right now, that is the Opoda farm, the home of Raila Odinga. Already we are seeing the erection of a tent area where we understand that the vigil will be marked. The body will spend time here on that night of Saturday so that the following day we can also now see the transition from here to the other side of Jaramogi Oginga Odinga University of Science and Technology, where we're expecting that the funeral service will now be held come Sunday from morning hours. And obviously, at the end of that day, Raila Odinga will be taken to his final resting place, that is at the Jaramogi Oginga family home, where you will see from your pictures the preparation of that gravesite continues. But it's also important to note here, Yvonne, because earlier on there were reports that Raila Odinga had indicated that he would want to be buried next to his mother, that is Mary Ajuma. We were able to visit that place earlier on. We were able to see what was going on, but at the time there was no clarity as to where the final resting place will be. But what we can tell you is that the decision was made to put it next to the father of Raila Odinga, that is Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. It is very close. It is just adjacent to the mausoleum where the father of Odinga died in January 1994, and he was buried on the 5th of February 1994. So that will now be the resting place of Raila Amolo Odinga next to Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. And obviously, we'll be here to see the preparation of that burial site. Yvonne.
for that update. We'll continue to check in with you. Obviously, there's going to be quite a bit of activity in Bondo for the next couple of days until Sunday. Now, at least 3 people died and several others were injured in chaos that erupted at the Moi International Sports Centre, Kasarani, where thousands of Kenyans had gathered to view the body of the late former Prime Minister Raila Odinga. A stampede occurred after crowds surged towards the presidential pavilion entrance, forcing security personnel to fire in the air to control the swelling number of mourners eager to pay their last respects. Security officers shot in the air, leaving at least 3 people dead from gunshot wounds. Jimmy Mbogo was in Kasarani and filed the following report.
What started off as a day to pay their last respect to former Prime Minister Raila Odinga quickly took a deadly turn, turning chaotic soon as security officers opened fire and lobbed tear gas at the crowd, which had grown agitated after hours of waiting for the body of the late Premier. The chaos claiming unknown number of lives, even as Citizen TV confirmed at least 3 bodies lying lifeless in and around Kasarani Stadium.
Yeah, tulikuwa tumekuja kuona baba, but unfortunately, tujiona anything, tumepigwa tear gas, like tumekimbia, some people are dead, umesikia like 2 people, 3, so tujue what's going on, yeah, bado kuna riots.
Nimekuja hapa nikiwa natarajia kuona baba, basi sasa hivi fujo yote mazee tumekaa hapa tangu tu, tunangoja baba afike, si hatuwezi toka.
Despite desperate last-minute efforts by Interior CS Kipchumba Murkomen and Principal Secretary Raymond Omolo to call off the trigger-happy officers, police are seen in this video recklessly lobbing tear gas at mourners seated on the stand. This seemingly making the volatile situation worse, sending people fleeing in panic. The chaotic scenes underscoring the emotional weight of Odinga's death for millions of Kenyans who viewed him as a symbol of democracy and reform. Despite the tragedy, thousands continue to hold on to hope that they would have one more chance to catch a glimpse of the slain leader.
Jalala tangu jana, saizi bado tunaomboleza tu baba. Lakini shida imekuwa hapa mingi, makarao wanapiga raia, hata already washaua watu 2. Si mpaka dakika mwisho hadi 90 tuko na baba hadi 90.
They showed up in their numbers to pay respect one final time to a man that they respected and believed that has their solution to all their political problems. But in the end, all they got was tear gas, chaos and pandemonium. Begging the question, could this have been handled better? Could it have been handled in a more humane way? Jimmy Mbogo, Citizen TV, Nairobi.
Now, the state funeral service for the late former Prime Minister Raila Odinga will be held tomorrow at the Nyayo National Stadium. The 2-hour service, to be conducted by the Anglican Church, will be led by President William Ruto and attended by local and international dignitaries. The ceremony will be followed by a public viewing of the body.
The National Committee on the state funeral of the late Prime Minister Raila Odinga is grateful to the thousands of mourners who continue to mourn him in dignity, and requests for calm and order as the mourning period gets into the 2nd day tomorrow. Tomorrow, there will be a state funeral service at Nyayo Stadium beginning 9 a.m. Guests are required to be settled by 8 a.m. This 2-hour state event will comprise of military honors, a church sermon from the Anglican Church of Kenya, eulogy by family and designated condolences, and or speeches from the leadership of Kenya and foreign heads of state and government. We have received confirmation of attendance of a fairly significant number of foreign heads of delegations at the highest level, and we have also received formal condolences from many heads of state and government from East Africa, from Africa, and from other continents around the world. There will be a public viewing of the remains of the late Prime Minister Raila Odinga after that state event. And therefore, those who want to continue mourning our departed leader have no cause to worry. There will be another opportunity, and we will stretch that opportunity from around 12 o'clock noon to as far as possible to give the highest number of mourners an opportunity to mourn and pay their last respects to their departed leader. The next briefing will be done tomorrow, Friday 17th of October 2025 at 6:30 p.m. here. And as Kenyans are aware, the government has declared tomorrow a public holiday to allow Kenyans to mourn the late Prime Minister Raila Odinga more conveniently. We have the apologies of the co-chairman of the National Funeral Committee, National State Funeral Committee of the late Raila Odinga, Senator Dr. Oburu Oginga, who is away in Siaya, but is represented by his sister, Dr. Wenwa Akinyi Oginga, who is here, together with the other family members here, whom I announced yesterday. That is all for now. We thank you and wish you a good night, and see you tomorrow at Nyayo Stadium. We continue condoling with the family and associates, friends and community, and the entire fraternity of Kenyans and international friends who knew the late Prime Minister, and continue to pray that his soul may rest in eternal peace. Thank you very much and have a good evening.
The repatriation ceremony of the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga was cancelled this morning after his supporters stormed the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, overrunning the airport's security barricade, disrupting the function. President William Ruto and other top government dignitaries were forced to wait at the presidential pavilion for the chaotic exit of Odinga's body before moving to the Moi International Sports Centre, Kasarani, to pay their last respects later in the evening. Emmanuel Tor reports.
His honors began as soon as the KQ plane, codenamed RAO 001, touched down at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. These two airport fire engines spraying plumes of water, arcing over the aircraft that was taxiing on its runway.
Water cannon salute.
This, according to the airport authorities, is referred to as airport tears, signifying the mourning by the airport staff. This rare occasion was the first in Kenya, as it is only a preserve of visiting high-ranking dignitaries and when a new aircraft is being received. However, as soon as Odinga's body was removed from the plane, pandemonium broke. As hundreds of his supporters stormed into the airport's VIP reception area, disrupting the repatriation ceremony that was already underway. Efforts by the Chief of Defense Forces to plead with the mourners to let the ceremony proceed, falling on deaf ears. The supporters waving twigs surrounded the body, wailing uncontrollably. Some hung on the plane, with a few gaining entry, forcing the organizers to call off the event. President William Ruto, who was waiting at the presidential pavilion to officially receive Odinga's body, also having to wait for calm to return before leaving. Odinga's remains, which were carried by KDF officers from the rank of a full colonel, were however carried on a military gun carriage. His body was also expected to receive a guard of honor, also known as a troop in line. The convoy also encountered a logistical nightmare, taking about 2.5 hours to move from the landing area to the airport's main entrance, a journey of about 3 minutes in normal times. The airport was also forced to temporarily shut its airspace for about 2 hours to allow the movement, with a number of morning flights diverted to other airports. Odinga's military honors, however, followed at the Moi International Sports Centre, Kasarani, as these officers stood by the former premier's body, facing away from it, their heads pointing down at a 45-degree angle, a sign of their mourning. The late Odinga will have a 24-hour guard until the day of his interment, with the officers interchanging shifts at an interval of 3 hours each. He is also set to receive a 19-gun salute, owing to his ranking position as a Prime Minister and a statesman. Emmanuel Toh, Citizen TV, Nairobi. For a man who pulled crowds to himself effortlessly, his return, albeit lifeless, will not have been any different. Raila Amolo Odinga, the enigma of Kenyan politics, brought the city of Nairobi to a standstill, with his most fervent supporters standing by him, even in death. Emmanuel Toh, Citizen TV, Nairobi.
And thousands of mourners joined the late Raila Odinga's 5-hour funeral procession from the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport all the way to the Kasarani Stadium for the public viewing exercise. Traffic along the busy Nairobi-Mombasa Road and Thika Road was disrupted as the military gun carriage carrying Odinga's body slowly made its way to its final destination, flanked by grieving Kenyans who paid their final respects. Seth Alale reports.
Mourners started arriving at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport as early as dawn. The crowd, which boarded public service vehicles, personal cars and borders, started surging from 7 a.m., prompting airport security personnel to erect a roadblock at the airport entrance. Mourning the fallen leader in various ways, the mourners tried advancing towards the passenger terminals, but were restrained by a multi-agency team of security officials consisting of GSU and the anti-riot police unit.
Expect traffic disruption along Mombasa Road because the crowd behind me is going to escort the entourage, the entourage carrying the cortege.
Not even the arrival of President William Ruto, a few minutes past 8 a.m., would guarantee them access to the international arrival terminals. At 9:30 a.m., the mourners burst into wild cheers as the Kenya Airways RAO 001 plane carrying Odinga's body flew past the crowd before touching down at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. The crowd then forcibly gained access past the security barriers, heading straight towards the international arrival section, where the body of the former Prime Minister was being offloaded before leading the 5-hours-long funeral procession from the airport to its final destination in Kasarani. Traffic along the Nairobi-Mombasa and Nairobi-Thika Road was interrupted as the military gun carriage slowly made its way to Kasarani Stadium. Onlookers who had gathered along the procession's route used the historic moment to pay their final respect to the fallen leader, who many described as a champion for democracy. Seth Olale, Citizen TV.
Now, the final flight for the late Prime Minister Raila Odinga also regarded as the country's father of democracy, took off from Mumbai in the early hours of Thursday morning in the company of his family and government officials. The body arrived in Nairobi at 9:30 a.m. to a rapturous welcome. Brenda Wanga reports on the emotive departure and arrival in the country.
Thousands of miles away from Kenyan soil, a grieving daughter welcomes the government delegation here to help bring home the body of her father, Kenya's fallen hero, the late Raila Odinga. Distance and loss combined to make the mood in this holding room at this Mumbai airport somber and solemn. The weight of their mission here is not lost on the government leaders and the family members of the late Raila Odinga as they take in the moment that they say came too soon. Outside the airport lounge, preparations for the heavy and daunting task are underway. A simple wooden cask belying the stature of the body of the man it holds lies in a truck. Simple wreaths carefully placed on it await the transfer into the plane that will bring Raila Odinga's body back home. Soon after, the team tasked with bringing Raila Odinga home makes its way to the bay. And shortly, the delegation from Nairobi gets its first glimpse of the casket bearing the body of the late leader. It is a moment that is poignant in many ways. Meticulously, they wrap his coffin in the Kenyan colors. For some of them, the reality that a man they walked beside, worked with and followed is truly no more registered. But for others, this moment is so much more in so many ways. And nowhere does the realization of the loss hit than for Raila's trusted bodyguard, Maurice Ogeta. As the small group of leaders and mourners observe silence, Ogeta's grief finds an outlet, perhaps reflecting on the journey to India with his boss and now this return trip that he had not envisioned, of the medical care mission that had suddenly and with finality turned into repatriation, a cross-continental effort to bring Baba back to the soil he had fought for his entire life. A brief prayer later, and the casket wrapped in Kenyan flag is slowly transferred into the belly of the Kenya Airways plane, and under the cover of the early morning darkness, the political giant of Kenya begins his final journey back home. Flight KQ-203, which became the most tracked flight in recent times, took nearly 5 hours to get into Kenyan space as Flight RAO 001.
In honor of the Right Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga.
In those final minutes, it touched down on Kenyan soil, bringing her gallant son home, a father back to his children, a husband back to his wife, and a leader back to his people one last time. Brenda Wanga, Citizen TV.
Now, the public viewing of the body of the late Raila Odinga, which had been scheduled to take place at Parliament buildings, was called off after a huge crowd of mourners turned up, overwhelming security arrangements. Many of the mourners, mostly youth, attempted to force their way into Parliament, prompting intervention by several leaders. The viewing ceremony was then moved to the Kasarani Stadium. Here's Melita Oletenges with that report.
At around 11 a.m. at the gates of the National Assembly, hundreds of mourners, most of them young people, had arrived early, determined to view the body of the late Raila Odinga. But their patience ran out as they attempted to storm Parliament, despite the fact that the body of the late opposition leader had not yet left Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. Efforts by police officers to control the crowd proved futile as the crowd climbed onto the Parliament gate and nearby buildings, chanting slogans and singing songs of mourning. Their numbers continued to swell by the minute, making it increasingly difficult to control the situation. Several leaders tried to calm the mourners, but their appeals fell on deaf ears until Embakasi East MP Babu Owino climbed atop the Parliament gate to urge the crowd to remain calm, convincing some of them to climb down. Moments later, a number of leaders appealed to the crowd to proceed to Kasarani Stadium, where the public viewing had been officially relocated. However, some mourners refused to leave, insisting they would not move until they saw Raila Odinga's body had arrived at Kasarani. Many remained outside Parliament as military officers dismantled decorations and removed the table that had been set up following the committee's decision to shift the viewing to Kasarani Stadium. Melita Oletenges, Citizen TV.
And meanwhile, Siaya Senator Dr. Oburu Oginga visited his brother Raila Odinga's home to officially communicate the passing of the late Odinga and to officially commence the mourning by the family and the community. Oginga addressed representatives of Odinga's clan before heading to Kango ka Jaramogi to identify Raila's final resting place. Sam Gituku is in Bondo.
4 p.m. at the Opoda farm. Dr. Oburu Oginga arrived to a loud welcome. He was here to perform an important ritual, welcomed by mourners who tracked his car to the doorstep of Raila's house. He moved straight to the family's living room, met by elders of the Sakwa clan, close family members, and part of Raila's friends. He told his audience of the recent happenings. He told them that Raila had died while receiving treatment in India, sad that a man who would have been returning home today, had things gone as per plan, was now returning lifeless. The significance of the moment being to formally inform of the demise and now allow mourners to come and offer their condolences here. According to Luo culture, Dr. Oburu was bringing the cry home. Dr. Oginga told the crowd outside of the plans ahead, which included identifying the final resting place of Raila.
Our people know how to welcome visitors, and I'm sure they are going to give Raila the recent burial and set up that he rightly deserves. This is what I came here to do, and I've given them the program.
At the Kango ka Jaramogi, the home of the Jaramogi family, the earlier hours Thursday were quiet, only a few mourners arriving. This here will be Odinga's resting place from Sunday. At the family graveyard, you find the tombstones of those that went ahead of Odinga. Earlier, there were reports that Odinga wished to be buried next to his mother, Mary Ajuma. Only that the space may have necessitated consultations should the family desire to put up a mausoleum in honor of Odinga.
We have not received any report from Dr. Oburu, but once we'll receive that, we'll just know where it will be put and how it will be done. So you just get report, yeah.
All that was settled when Dr. Oburu Oginga visited the home with a decision to lay him next to his father, Jaramogi. At the Jaramogi Mausoleum stands the permanent imprint of the memory of Kenya's first vice president. Back at the Opoda farm, the Kenya Power and Lighting Company installed a higher capacity transformer, enhancing the power supply ahead of the busy weekend. It is here that Raila's body will spend the night on Saturday ahead of the funeral service at the Jaramogi Oginga Odinga University, which is nearby. As soon as Dr. Oburu delivered his message, the clouds that had gathered poured, replete with thunderstorms, as if in solidarity with the fallen leader. Sam Gituku, Citizen TV, Bondo, Siaya County.
Right, and even as those tributes continue and the preparations continue for his final send-off, we'll also be having some reflections here tonight, as we have done here on Citizen Television. Dr. Alex Sawiti and Ndiritu Muridhi will be joining me in just a short while to reflect a little further on the life and times of the late Raila Odinga. Now, as the nation continues to mourn the death of the former Prime Minister, tributes continue to highlight his remarkable political journey and his pivotal role in shaping Kenya's democracy. But few know the story of his early years in the little-known Kaloleni estate, where the Odinga family once lived. Laura Otieno takes a walk through the now dilapidated estate that still holds echoes of the family's past, a place where friendships, values and experiences would later shape Raila Odinga's political path.
At Kaloleni Estate in Kisumu, an old semi-permanent house stands majestically in the middle of the now informal settlement. The worn-out walls, old-style wooden doors, and even the structure has been maintained for nearly 8 decades. This house belonged to Mzee Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. It's here that he raised Raila Odinga and his other siblings. This is where Odinga sat as the rest of his children mingled with the rest.
Kulikuwa kuna wakati wa ongogo na wakati wa kupiga paka. Sasa alikuwa kimuona kijana mmoja ambaye ni mrefu, alikuwa anatuzidi, alikuwa anapenda kuvaa fentili. Sisi tunaita fentili au manati. Akivaa pakubwa, ilikuwa sana kwenda kupiga mapaka na kwenda kupiga wakati wa ongogo na kuwinda apoyo. Si apoyo ni sungura. Ndio nyakatizo.
While most of Raila's age mates have since relocated, those who lived here in the 50s says the apple did not fall far from the tree. Despite his father's towering stature, Raila's father remained a humble man, a trait that Raila inherited and carried throughout his life, earning him the respect and trust that made him an almost undisputed leader of his community.
Ikiwa kuna mambo ya uchaguzi yoyote, huyu mzee lazima atakuja Kaloleni, atakutana na wale wazee wa Kiislamu, wale wa Kaloleni, na kuwaeleza vile yeye anavyotaka, na mwisho ya siku utakuta yeye amefaulu kuchaguliwa kwa sababu ya support ya hawa.
Raila will pick up your call. Raila will answer your call if it is missed call. That is the Raila I know. Not many leaders. I don't want to mention leaders, but I know many leaders that if I were to call them and say that so and so is not fit to be a leader because I voted for him, he doesn't pick up my calls, I would mention 1,000.
The sun setting on the political father figure of Nyanza has cast long shadows over the region's future.
But now it's gone forever.
Yet, the footprints of his journey remained etched in the memories of those who watched him grow from a young boy hunting around Kaloleni Estate to one of Kenya's most formidable and fearless politicians.
It is on the streets of Kaloleni that Raila Odinga walked as a boy back in the early 1950s as he made his way to Kisumu Union Primary School. And as the entire nation mourns the loss of a political enigma, here they mourn a neighbor and a friend. Laura Otieno, Citizen TV, Kisumu.
And our coverage of that continues here on Citizen Television. I want us to, follow up on that very interesting story that Laura Otieno filed from Kaloleni, where Raila Odinga grew up as a child. And let's get some more reflections on the man. Dr. Alex Awiti and Nderitu Muriithi join me here. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here with us today. Would have been great to have this under different circumstances, but here we are. I'd like to begin with you, Dr. Awiti. Just your reaction, your response to when you first heard the news of Raila Odinga's passing.
Thanks, Yvonne. I think first I would like to join the rest of the country in condoling with the family of the late Prime Minister Raila Odinga. I had the news of his passing yesterday in Kisumu. That's where I was. And what came to my mind was the poet John Donne and the last stanza of the poem, No Man is an Island, where he says, every man's death diminishes me. And therefore do not, because I'm involved in mankind, and therefore do not send to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for you. So I think every passing of any person that is close or dear to anyone reminds us, in a very stark way of our own mortality, shared mortality. But I think it joins the country in a very solemn moment to celebrate a life. I think it moves from mourning for a person of Raila's stature to celebrating and gratitude for what he sacrificed and the service and the legacy that he has bequeathed this country. It's really sad, and I think there'll be many conversations, and we'll try to unpack what this really means, this particular event of his passing, and what it is that he leaves behind as a path of distinguished service. And for a man of that stature, there is going to be two sides of the story.
It's, like you say, we're still unpacking what this means, probably coming to terms with it even as we consider his legacy. Nderitu Muriithi, for everybody who's watching, and they will be wondering why we have you here today. You are currently the chair of the Kenya Revenue Authority, but you knew Raila Odinga, and you're not here in that capacity. You knew Raila Odinga very well. In fact, for those who remember, in 2022, you were appointed the chair of Raila Odinga's presidential campaign secretariat. Tell us your reaction, your reflection to the man that you knew very personally.
I think, like most people, I was stunned by the news. Also, a number of colleagues and friends were reaching out when information started filtering for me to confirm, what the actual circumstance was. So I was stunned, and I think I join everyone in the Republic in consoling the family, consoling friends, but also consoling ourselves, because the Prime Minister was indeed the Prime Minister for all of us, and a great son of this Republic. So it's been 2 days, somewhat in slow motion, because, when the news came through, obviously people are in different activities. And of course, for a number of people, then it was winding those activities down, or basically postponing them to, attend to what was actually quite devastating news for many people. And I think you saw that today, no doubt, an overwhelming heroes, welcome, but also send off, perhaps way more than had been anticipated. But it's a reflection of who the Prime Minister was and remains in terms of his role in this state, in the psyche of politics of Kenya. And I'm quite certain his legacy will endure. As Alex was saying, I think for many, many days and months and years to come, Kenyans will debate the role of Right Honorable Raila Odinga in democracy, in democratizing Kenya, in standing for rights, in nudging the state further and further towards democracy. I'm sure people will debate his role in how democracy is conducted, because sometimes I think we forget that democracy is about debate, and very often you may have a different view from myself, and me from you, or from Alex, or from and it is that ability for us to debate and to convince one another. That's what democracy is about. And I think that the Prime Minister, the second Prime Minister, because at the independence, Kenya was so we had the Prime Minister.
Yes.
And then the Right Honorable Raila Odinga was the second Prime Minister of the Republic. So I'm sure we would debate, and books will be written into the future about the various roles. And I would agree with Alex that the Right Honorable Raila Odinga perhaps has many facets, which is perhaps what the book Enigma was about, that he has so many facets that no one characterization is sufficient to describe him.
And we will talk about that and the role that he's played in the country for many, many decades. What's your personal feeling? You worked with him in the campaign secretariat in the just concluded elections in 2022, and when I say just concluded, it really does in some respects feel like it was just the other day. But tell us about the man, Raila Odinga, that you knew on a personal level, working closely with him, perhaps more than most people.
A realist, a political realist. And you see, maybe that's why people thought it was a contradiction, that you could have such high ideals but still be able to act as a political realist. Because, for example, what happens if the election doesn't go in your favor? How do you relate to competitors? How do you relate to different ideas and ideals? So I found him, I saw him an incredible realist. I found a leader, really an extraordinary leader, able to overcome many things, personal loss, disappointment in the political front, able to reflect, and to sit with him was to almost always take a lesson in history. That many conversations he would weave the fabric of history as you discussed with him. I also found a fatherly figure, and no wonder many people called him Baba, because in probably for the last 15, 20 years has cast has conducted his leadership in that manner. So I think that I would not really be able to do justice to the leadership of the man. What I can say really is that Kenya is better off for him having been in Kenya and for him having offered leadership in the Republic.
Yeah, and there's so many facets to a man, and that's what we're starting to learn and maybe get a deeper glimpse into. I mean, I think there was a conversation we were having with someone that said, the tale of blind men with an elephant. And depending on which way you touch, you have a completely different interpretation of it. Is that the man you saw in public life? And, you know, Nderitu says he was a realist. And, you know, what are your reflections of this man? Perhaps the reason he was called an enigma, because there were certain times he would make decisions that some people would be surprised by. You know, being in the political scene and having, you know, dominated and made a mark across various epochs in our history. How would you describe him in that respect?
So I got to meet him many times. Worked on some issues with him on the periphery, advising his campaign, for example. And I think, as Nderitu says, he was kind of a really grounded political pragmatist. An incredibly versatile and adaptive figure that could read any political situation and act appropriately. If you look at the grind of politics and how it just basically withers individuals between electoral cycles, he is a man who has endured. He has been relevant every electoral cycle. Even when you wrote him off. Even when
he doesn't win.
When he doesn't win. He comes back
because
and
for
you
most
couldn't write him
people,
off.
you would win and, you know, sort of go into oblivion and nurse your loss.
Absolutely. So that speaks to what Nderitu just said, that he could adapt and he could make the most pragmatic decisions that still endeared him and enhanced his relevance, because he responded and tuned his responses in a political fashion to what was demanded of the moment. And he consistently redefined himself. And you can see across, and I think, and that's why in many ways there's going to be a lot of unending debate about who he really was as a person and as a politician. You know, he is somebody who disagreed with Moi just on anything you can imagine, did the handshake and got the NDP into KANU in the run-up to the 2002 elections. So they were there for about a couple of years. He worked with Kibaki to win the election. They fell out, and they came back together in 2008. And Uhuru Kenyatta was also his competitor. And much more recently, President Ruto was his competitor. But his capacity to compromise, to in many ways understand what was needed for the moment and make the right political decision, even when people didn't agree with him. And he always knew that in a lot of instances people didn't agree with him, but he still managed to build some consensus around every decision that he made. So I think, in my view, in some respects, when you met the man in real life, given the stature that he cut as a consummate political player, a very astute statesman, he was still very ordinary. He was very unassuming. And I don't think that there are many people who can be that significant in society and still be absolutely accessible, ordinary people. You'd meet Raila in a bar, go to the counter, have a chat with him, and there would be no protocol, no airs, no pretensions. He was just a guy in a pub having a good time. And then when he shows up on the political stage, he is the statesman that you expect him to be, and he performs at that level. So I think that versatility, you know, that humanity really defines the many facets of him that he could perform at very different stages to really step up to the occasion and do what he had to do. And I think that's a very rare trait, even for ordinary human beings. We try to be one thing, but he knew he could be as many things as the situation demanded of him.
Yeah, and humans are complex and diverse, and perhaps the manifestation is when we take a look at him and his life.
May I add
to
what Alex is saying? See, I would add, in fact, it's at the social level, at the political platform, but also in the boardroom. Because, you know, when I think back in the Kibaki years when he was Prime Minister, and he would chair the National Economic and Social Council. And this council was the place we went to debate policy. And you know, I mean, his depth, his depth of understanding of policy questions. So it was a spectrum. And I think that this ability, this pragmatism that Alex is saying, is perhaps what sets him apart when you look at, you know, the front line of politics, not just in our republic, but perhaps on the continent. That look, you know, even say when we compete, when you win, you know, you are not the chair of only those who have elected you. You are leading
everybody else.
And you have to be able to work with everybody. And that is an amazing ability that I think many practitioners perhaps forget. That we can compete really strongly, but at the end of it, we must be one, because it is one republic, it is one people, and our destiny is tied. No matter, you know, it's tied together.
When we talk about the country's quest for democracy since independence in its various stages and phases, Alex, what would you say would be the role? And like we said, there is a lot you can say about a career and about a life that spans 80 years, with over 60 of that spent in public life. But Raila's place in the country's quest towards democratization.
I think, you know, since independence, you know, with the late President Jomo Kenyatta and President Daniel Arap Moi, you know, we had a kind of democracy. It just worked differently from a normal multi-party democracy. Of course, we voted ourselves basically to make ourselves a de facto one-party state. So there are all these processes. And then we outgrew that, and the quest to become more honest in the 90s. And of course, we had the coup in which he was implicated, etc. So in these kind of multi-ethnic societies that are nascent and emerging potential democracies, the process of governance and the performance of leadership and political processes can be very noisy. And it's never a smooth process. So Raila's encounters and experiences in the Moi in the Moi days were really what they had to be. It was a nation that was yearning for a different dispensation, a different way to run public affairs and to conduct critical elements that drive our existence. So we saw the end of that with the reinstatement, with the repeal of Section 2A of the Constitution in 1990, and then the first multi-party elections in 1992, which President Moi won, and then the 1997 one that he won as well. So, and then of course the fight didn't stop there. And then we had the 2002 elections, which promised everything and basically run into the usual kinds of problems that you'd expect in a vibrant, noisy democracy. And then it gave us the new constitution. And then we had the first constitution that had significant opportunities to drive the country forward, and then started running afoul, especially in the conduct of elections, and we started seeing new frontiers in terms of just the potential to create a really solid and independent judiciary process that then overturned President Kenyatta's election. So, and in all of these things, it is his involvement and his engagement to consistently push the country, as Neruda said, you know, to appeal to a better angel. So we can be better as a society. And we're not perfect yet, but we should strive to get to a certain ideal. And I think this quest in him, that he was not satisfied at any given point and still imagined that we could do better, our institutions could get stronger, our societies could get much more vigilant in terms of the voting population, and the arms of government, parliament, the judiciary, and the executive could discharge their constitutional responsibilities in ways that honored the sacred promises of the Constitution. So I think, in my view, the fact that he never sat on his laurels and said, it's done. He'd have said that in 1992.
Yeah.
It's delivered. Now we are a multi-party democracy. But we said there's something deficient about the constitutional order. We should aspire to something different. He was at the forefront of that with President Kibaki. So I think this is something that we will debate in many respects. The Constitution is still not a perfect document. We're still having rambles of maybe we should change this or change that and repeal this and all of that. So I think what he has taught us is that as a country, if we can sit around the table, make compromises and arrive at a process of joint consensus to improve our polity, we will be stronger. And I think I've had this discussion with many colleagues and friends from other countries, like, for instance, in Uganda. And we say, why is electoral politics in Uganda such a defined zero-sum game that Museveni and Besigye and Bobi Wine will never sit on a table to have a conversation? Why is it that the political elite in this country can easily do deals and arrive at a consensus that saves the country from the brink? We saw that in 2007, demonstrated in the most elegant way. And we've seen very close approximations of getting to the precipice in the Kenyatta administration and with Ruto. And that whole time, the political elite came together and did a sensible thing. There could be people on both sides of the political divide who disagree with these individuals and the actions that they took at that time. And I know some of them. But as Saitoti said, at a certain point,
there comes a time.
There comes a time when the nation is bigger than the individual. And I think Raila lived that. There are some points you may disagree with how he did it and the process that we got there, but the nation is better. And as Nehru said, we are better for the service that he rendered this nation.
Yeah, and it's an unending quest for democracy. So you never really arrive at a destination. And it was something, Dorito, that you said, about the art of debate and the ability to understand that there are different sides to an issue, to an argument, if you wish. But do you think in that quest towards democracy, then that former Prime Minister Raila Odinga was able to push us to that point of understanding that, hey, there is a different voice and you can challenge the authority, you can challenge the status quo, and sort of force a conversation and force a debate of different sides and different opinions. Do you think that could be one of the things? Because, I mean, throughout all of that, every time there was status quo and there was the authority, Raila Odinga would be the one to say, well, hey, no, not this way. I have a different view. What are your thoughts?
I think that democracy in many ways is a continuous search for a more perfect nation. So that it will not really end. In every generation, there is something that we could be doing better so that our democracy is better, our nation is better, the quality of life is better. So what I see myself when I reflect on the Prime Minister's times is exactly that you are able to push for reform, but you must become pragmatic so that push is not what breaks the nation apart, is not what, so banning the house altogether is actually not the solution. But robust debate, respecting perhaps the opinion, accepting an outcome, not necessarily the one that you preferred, all of those are tenets of what we should actually be aspiring to do more and more of, in leadership. And I would say not just in politics, but across many fields of society. And speaking, Alex spoke a bit about comparison. You see, today, the world's, shall we say, advanced democracies themselves are finding there are things they need to do. That perhaps some issues, some problems, some challenges that they thought they had overcome, they had actually not overcome, and that those challenges are with them. Unfortunately, of course, sometimes people, solutions that are brought to the table do not necessarily provide the answer. I mean, one can think about, for example, migration debates in North America, in Western Europe, and the arguments being made that, you know, if you stop migration, then the problems will go away. But the reality is that that doesn't really happen. So, a continuous effort to build a better nation. And for that to happen, I think leaders have to emulate the Prime Minister in the manner that he was able to make compromise, argue his case. He would know that even if you look at more recent times, as you've pointed out, that not everybody supported a particular direction, but he argued strongly for that direction. And that happened throughout his political career time and time again. And I think it is something that all of us who are engaged in leadership in the public space must aspire to. And I would even think it happens even in the private sector.
Yeah.
I mean, you've seen sometimes, for example, if shareholders quarrel and they cannot find a compromise, that in fact can actually destroy their business. So it has application across the spectrum of life.
Yeah, indeed. And the life and times, I guess, is what we are all going to be focusing on and reflecting. And gentlemen, stay with me. I just want to continue to update our viewers on the day that we have had today. Quite a few events that have taken place now, even though there had to be a change of plans with where the body of the late Raila Odinga would be viewed from Parliament to Moi Sports Centre, Kasarani, and even with the chaos witnessed, the planned public viewing finally took off, and many thousands of Kenyans and mourners were able to pay their final respects to the late Prime Minister, former Prime Minister Raila Odinga.
A somber procession of thousands of supporters of the former Premier Raila Odinga, in expression of honor and deep sorrow for losing a man they considered an icon in Kenya's political history, a pillar in democracy, constitutionalism and reforms. The mourners braced themselves for a more than 4-hour walk through a 32-kilometer stretch from the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport to Moi International Sports Centre, Kasarani, along Thika Road. At around 2 p.m., the remains of the former premier, escorted by a sea of humanity under tight security, arrived at the stadium. It was already almost full to capacity, with mourners who had started trickling in from as early as 10 a.m. around the time the venue of the public viewing was changed from Parliament to Kasarani. The reception by an overwhelming crowd that had seemingly grown impatient after hours of waiting got chaotic, with the police forced to fire in the air and lob tear gas canisters to contain the crowd, which had attempted to forcefully access the VIP staging area where Raila's body was being held. Public viewing was delayed further as the security detail escalated their efforts to control the crowd of mourners. Backed by a section of leaders who had to plead with the mourners to heed to the directives issued and allow the process to flow smoothly. Few minutes to 5 p.m., Raila Odinga's remains were finally laid in state, about 4 hours behind schedule.
And us as a nation, that we may be strengthened in you.
And after brief prayers conducted by the chaplains of the Kenya Defence Forces, President William Ruto was first to view the remains and pay his last respect, followed by Mama Ida Odinga, who led the family in facing this unfortunate reality of their final moment with the patriarch of their home. Other dignitaries, including leaders of the Orange Democratic Movement, cabinet secretaries, and other officials, also paid their final respects. before the remains were moved from the VIP area to a designated section for members of the public to view it. This time, the security detail left nothing to chance. The remains of Raila Odinga were finally ferried from the stadium, and the exercise extended to Friday to allow more mourners to pay their last respect. Safin Acheng Oma, Citizen TV.
And indeed, as Safin says, there will be another chance for many mourners to pay their final respects. That's happening tomorrow, and that'll take place after the state funeral service that is bound to take 2 hours. As Professor Kithure Kindiki, the Deputy President, said, it'll be happening from noon to as late as possible to allow many more who want to pay their final respects. And that is what will be happening here in Nairobi. But in Kisumu, the venue for the viewing of the body of former Prime Minister Raila Odinga on Saturday has been changed to the Jomo Kenyatta Stadium in Mamboleo. Now, speaking after touring the grounds, Kisumu County Commissioner Benson Leparmorijo said that the decision was arrived at following consultations within the organizing committee led by the Deputy President. The viewing had earlier been assigned to the Moi Stadium. Raila's body will be flown to the Jomo Kenyatta Stadium in Mamboleo on Saturday before it proceeds to Bondo for interment the following day.
And as been said by the chair, that is the Deputy President, yesterday, that the viewing will be at Moi Stadium. After consultation with the team, they changed, and we are here with the instructions from the chair, that the Deputy President, that this will be the place where the function will be as the body arrives in Kisumu. So we came to see the place and then make the necessary arrangements, and then just to allocate how the mourners will be able to access this stadium. We have gate 5, we have gate 6, and we have the VIP gate.
There were a few cases of muggings and extortions within our city. That cannot be allowed in law because it's criminal. So we request that all our mourners just do it in a peaceful way and observe the law to the letter.
So we are going to open at least for the public 3 gates, entrance and exit, and the VIP area be controlled, and where as Salmon Orinba said. So we expect this to be the venue, and we called all the supporters to come and mourn, but not to be rowdy.
Now, thousands of Mombasa residents have continued to mourn the late Raila Odinga for a second day, lighting candles and holding peaceful processions in his honor. The Law Council of Elders from the coast has also convened, announcing plans to send a special delegation to represent the community at his burial, amid growing concerns of internal divisions following Odinga's demise. Willie Lusige reports.
For the second day with no sign of fatigue, thousands of Mombasa residents poured into the streets marching peacefully to mourn the former Prime Minister and ODM party leader, the late Raila Amolo Odinga. Lighting candles, offering prayers and honoring the man they call a true patriot. They hailed Odinga as a fearless reformist, a hero who stood for the rights of the ordinary citizen, and a champion of democracy who remained deeply loved along the coast.
Huu ni msiba wa Kenya nzima, tumempoteza baba wa taifa, na sisi kama watu wa pwani tunasema tuko pamoja na taifa zima kutuma maombi yetu ya rambirambi.
Amid grief and emotion, many recall his lifelong struggle for Kenya's second liberation and his fight for justice and equality.
Tunamuongeleza Mheshimiwa Raila kwa siku 7 mfululizo, hatuna fujo wala nini.
The Luo Council of Elders from the coast met in Mombasa, expressing deep concern over Raila's passing, describing him as a unifying pillar who kept the community together.
Tumebaki kama mayatima. Na tunaogopa, hii ni kweli,
ya kwamba sisi katika Mombasa bila Raila pengine watu wengi watabadilika.
Some elders will join a special delegation from the Coast region to attend the burial on behalf of the people.
We are going to send at least 10 buses with our people to go and witness the final interment of the peer.
Naomba Wakenya wawe watulivu na wawe na amani wakati wa kifo, wakati wa majonzi kama hii.
Odinga was deeply admired at the Coast, respected by leaders and ordinary citizens alike. His death leaves a huge void in a region that stood firmly behind him for decades. Willie Lusige, Citizen TV.
The Council of Governors has eulogized former Prime Minister Raila Odinga as a forthright leader, an astute politician, a defender of devolution, and a gentle giant who stood for true justice. In an extraordinary meeting of the governors this afternoon called to eulogize Raila, each of the governors present got an opportunity to sign a condolence book placed at the COG headquarters in honor of the Right Honorable Raila Odinga, as well as give personal tributes. The county chiefs memorialized Odinga as a father of devolution and a fierce defender of equity and equality. The governors asked their fellow politicians to emulate the fallen hero and forged a united front for the country.
If there was a transformational and charismatic leader in the Kenyan political space in our generation, it was Raila Amolo Odinga. For the political grievances that he had at personal level, you can see how much he really believed in peace and how much he sacrificed.
Our hearts are profoundly heavy as we bid goodbye to the doyen of Kenyan politics, a man whose life's work undeniably shaped the course of our nation's history. A statesman par excellence, a Pan-Africanist, a fighter for social justice, and a man whose love for his country was unwavering.
Despite the fact that Raila Odinga had the capacity to sink this country by taking hardline positions after elections, he always chose the narrow path of uniting Kenyans after the competitive process.
Members of Parliament today also mourned the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, with many highlighting their collaboration with him. Some MPs reflected on Raila's influence in their political lives, saying that Kenya has lost a pillar and a giant of politics.
Raila Odinga outlived regimes. Raila Odinga outwitted his rivals. Raila Odinga outlasted movements. He was and shall remain forever in our hearts.
He has also shown us politics is not a platform of making or creating hatred, but politics is a platform of healing. It's not a platform of building bridges, but also a platform of reconciliation.
And even as he rests, I beg of him that may he find a soft place to land on, Honorable Speaker, to sleep, to lay his head on behalf of this country, because I don't really think that this country gave him the best that we ought to have given him, but may his soul rest in eternity.
Honorable Speaker, Raila Odinga, as I said, believed in dialogue and reconciliation. The best gift that we can give to this great man is to keep that reconciliation kicking, is to make sure that we continue to dialogue even when we have disagreements, Honorable Speaker.
And Raila became president of Kenya, even if they didn't pronounce him president, but the thieves themselves know that he was the president of Kenya. They stole his win, and all the same, we soldiered on.
And to those who wished Baba Raila Amolo Odinga death, Baba is gone. Wa Maua, wa Mnyoro. We will ever we will ever think about that. Baba, rest well.
Right, so that was what was happening on the floor of the House today. And by the way, there were tributes that were paid in Parliament, both at the National Assembly and at the Senate, and that took place today.